Well, as you can see, it's day 7, and we're looking at the examples in the workbook, page 26. Okay, so this is where we're at. All right, so let's have a look at this. We're trying to calculate pay. All right, looking at overtime, all that kind of jazz. So let's get pens out. So let's go with this first one here. Gavin earns $15.22 per hour for a standard 40-hour week. What is his normal earnings in the week? When it says normal earnings, what we're doing there is we're saying it's not overtime. That colour's pretty ordinary. Not overtime. Okay, so just if he has no overtime at all, what happens as a standard amount of stuff for the week? Okay, straightforward. Hey, $15.22 times 40. Okay, he's got 40 hours, $15.22. Cheap and cheerful. All right, $608.80. Okay, so that's maybe 1 mark if that was an exam question. All right, let's look at this next one though. Helen earns $18.40 an hour for a standard 40-hour week. Now, when they say standard 40 hours, that's all set up in the enterprise bargaining agreements of whatever industry you're in. So they will say that anything up to 40 hours or anything up to 38 hours is the normal hourly rate. Okay, and over that is overtime. So standard 40-hour week, $18.40 per hour, and overtime is earned at time and a half. So what does she earn for working 43 hours? All right, so we've got $18.40 for the standard 40 hours. Okay, now it might help you just with your thinking to put that in brackets. You don't mathematically need to, but it might help. All right, so 40 hours are just $18.40, but then 3 hours is time and a half. So we've got 1.5 times the time and a half, times the standard rate, times the number of hours. Okay, so I'll just use a bit of different colour here. You don't have to do this in the real question, but this here, that is the normal. Yep, that's your normal hours, and this is the overtime. Okay, now you don't have to, when you're normally doing it, you don't have to write that stuff in, but just to show you what's going on there. You can then feed all of that into the calculator in one go. It'll do it. Or if you just want to do it in 2 steps, okay, that's $736, and this is $82.80. So overall, her take-home pay is $818.80. Sweet. Okay. Let me just move this up now. Okay, so what about if you've got a timesheet? Okay, so Greg earns $16.60 per hour with a standard working day of 8 hours. Now, this is a different situation. Rather than saying, let's look at it on a week, this particular workplace looks at it from the point of view of a day. So anything up to 8 hours in one day is not considered overtime. Overtime is paid at time and a half each day. Now, some places work like that, okay? Complete this timesheet to calculate the normal and overtime hours in the whole week. All right, so you've got to figure out how many total hours are in this particular day. So he starts work at 7 a.m., he finishes at 3:30 p.m. All right, so here's how I tend to do that, okay? So take it to midday. 7 a.m. to midday is 5 hours. Then from midday onwards, this year that's 3.5 hours. So overall, I've got 8.5 hours. Now, anything up to 8 hours is normal. So I've got normal 8 hours there and half an hour of overtime. Okay, so that's how we worked that week, or that day. This one here, 8 till 12 is 4 hours plus another 4. So that's 8. He does 8 hours exactly. So there's normal 8 hours, no overtime. It doesn't do any overtime that day. This is just 1 hour extra than what it was before, but let's do the process. 8 to 12 is 4 hours. 12 to 5 is 5 hours. So that's 4 plus 5. That's 9 hours. So that's 8 normal hours and 1 hour of overtime. 7 to 12, that's 5 hours plus 4.5. So it's 9.5 hours. Okay, so he does 8 hours normal and 1.5 of overtime. This one here ends up being 8 hours exactly, 8 hours normal and no overtime. Okay, now just pause there for a second. Let's say one day ended up being 7 hours. Well, then that's just 7 normal hours. It's not, this isn't saying every day, oh, sorry, go back up here. This is not saying every day must be 8 hours. What it's saying is everything up to 8 hours is considered at the normal rate. Okay? So if there was one here that was some maybe 6 hours, then there would be 6 normal hours and no overtime. All right. When you add all of that up, I've got 40 there, I've got 43 there, and there's 3 hours overtime there. Cool. Now, if this was an exam question, it's probably a mark for each of those totals. All right, moving on now. Okay, so that's the timesheet figured out. Now, what's he get paid? Okay, if that's what his week looked like, what does he actually get paid? All right, so let's do the normal hours, and then we'll do the overtime. I'm not dealing with this one, okay, because I've got to break it up. I've got to split it up into the two with normal and overtime. All right, so it's $16.60 for 40 hours. Cool. I'll put some brackets around that, but that's my normal. And then I've got my overtime. It's time and a half times $16.60 times 3. Okay, and if you put all that into the calculator, you get $738.70. Okay, right, so that's the examples. That's how you do basic pay calculations. Okay, just you got to read what does it do for the overtime. Okay, you can have double time in there. Like some places might say, you know, the first 3 hours of overtime is time and a half, and anything past that is double time. Okay, so if you've got 5 hours of overtime, the first 3 is time and a half. It depends on the question, which is kind of reflecting what the enterprise bargaining agreements for particular workplaces reflect. Okay, but overtime, you normal hours, and then you got the overtime. Righto, get to it.